It's Celestine Emenze. I'll let him do the proper introduction. So a little bit about yourself and why it is that it's wonderful for us to have you here and to listen to you.
Thank you so much. So, Celestine Emenze, I'm an accountant by training. I'm also a management consultant. I'm very passionate about healthcare as it relates to finances and technology.
The first thing I would ask you would be, how does an individual effectively manage their finance?
Okay, so personal finances, for me, it's a function of being able to control what you can and then plan for what you cannot control, and also to automate your processes, your finance processes. What I mean by that is you know your inflow, you know your outflow. So these are things that you can control. You can determine where your money goes at every point in time. But there are certain things you can't control, emergencies, contingencies, and certain eventualities, death and all. So you need to plan for those things too. Having a health insurance, having a life cover, and then for savings and investments, these are things that a lot of people do not really pay so much attention to. They need to be able to automate that process in such a way that once you get money flowing into your account, you'd know that a certain percentage of it needs to go out automatically into your savings or your investment. Now, the issue that people have over time is that they find it difficult to say exactly where every kobo or every cent goes to because off the top of their head they see money in their account and they're like, I have money, and then
I'm
they
guilty of
just
that as well.
spend it, and before you know it, it's middle of the month, they're like, I had a lot of money before, what's going on right now? It's because they didn't name every naira as to know where each one is going to go. So there is a general rule of the 50 30 20 rule. So 50% into your needs, 30% into what you want,
Mhm.
splurging, and then 20% into investments and debt servicing. I go a step further with those things because when you just say randomly, I'm going to use an example. Someone who earns 100,000. So
Okay.
person says 50,000 into my needs, rent, feeding and transportation, and then 30,000 naira to run around and do other things I want, splurging, and then 20,000 to debt servicing and all. But the problem is if you don't break down those figures into very minuscule details, you find out that you would end up spending more than those things. So I'll tell people most of the time that even with the 50%, the 30%, you also need to have like very concrete details as to where each money is going into. So, and the way you manage finances in this part of the world is quite different from the way it should be managed, personal finances for people in developed countries. Because in developed countries, there are certain infrastructure that they have that we don't have, that we need to pay serious attention to. Things like insurance, things like emergency funds, contingencies, and stuff. So, yes, basically, to manage your finances effectively, the first thing you need to do is you need to have a budget. Without a budget, you're going to do unplanned spending
Mm.
and you're going to lose it. So when you have a budget, the next part is to track that budget, follow that budget. It's easy to draft something. The problem is executing it, following
Following through.
through.
Yeah.
Yes. So you need to follow through and ensure that that is taken care of. Everything is taken care of. And then when you're planning, plan for emergencies, plan for your health care, plan for insurance.
So where does that fall in
So,
the 50, 30, 20 rule?
yes, good. So, the 50%, the 50 percent rule is where operational expenses go into other things like feeding, rent, transportation, and all. So, you find out that most people, especially people in the higher income bracket, oftentimes maintain a very reasonable lifestyle. You find out that sometimes they don't even need to spend up to 50%. So they have a lot more money to play around with. Now, investments and insurance, they go into the 20%. So there's a savings part and there's an investment part. And then for people that have debt, you also need to cater into servicing your debt. So I tell people you should have at least five accounts.
Okay.
Five accounts, yes. The first account is your operational account that handles your day-to-day running expenses. That is where your 50% will go to 40, 50%, depending on how large your lifestyle is and your income. So that's standard, your day-to-day running. Now, there is what I call the peace of mind account.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is where you put money for emergencies. You would also know that come what may, I would also have money to fall back on if something goes wrong without me planning for it. So that's where emergency funds come in. And then there is the investment account. Oftentimes, people could have small amounts of money in the investment account and they use it to buy a small stock, or they could build up the funds to a point where they can use it to maybe buy a house or whatever big, large investment they want to do. So that is the third account, the investment account. And then there is a fourth account. This fourth account is mostly for people in this side, especially people who are very much inclined to helping others around them. I call that your charity account. It's also where tithing goes into and all those things. So your charity account. You should also know that with that account, any money that's inside there and you expend that money, at the end of the day, someone comes back to you and tells you, I need money. If there's no money in that account, there's nothing to give the person. Yes.
But I mean, to point out,
Yes.
some may argue that what if the request is, in simple terms, life and death situation?
So life and death situation is something I can classify as emergency.
Okay.
But if it's not a life and death situation, for me, it is something that you can factor into future plans.
Okay.
So, okay, I have taken note of your request. I will attend to it
So
next
it's
time.
okay to say no
It's okay
to
to say
requests.
no. And you can only say no when you have planned every naira.
I mean, it's, I think for me, it's a very, and I know quite a number of people have the same issues, what we call the black tax.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, for anyone who is really paying the black tax,
Yes.
for those of us who don't understand the black tax, right, that's essentially money that, goes into funding relatives, and sometimes not just relatives, maybe extended
Friends and
family,
family.
friends, and all the rest, right? So we typically, call it a black tax. And you'll find that individuals, I have friends and I know I've met people who more or less finance a major part of, it could be their sibling, their parents, their extended family,
Mm,
nieces, nephews, and the likes, right?
yes.
They're the ones more or less sponsoring major parts of those people's lives,
Yes.
right? How do they manage it? How do you get out of such? Because over time, we know that there's an over dependency that comes into play
Hmm.
and a sense of entitlement that
Exactly.
comes into play. How do you navigate that? What do you tell the person? How do they navigate such a situation?
Okay, so um, there are two scenarios here. The first scenario is when their lifestyle depends on you. They don't have anything they're doing. So you need to cater for them. Maybe they're ill or something, and so you have to
Mhm.
cater for them. So that would fall under your normal operational expenses. So you need to plan that as the normal expenses you make every day. But then if it's a situation where they have something they're doing, so you are supporting at interval,
Mhm.
that falls under the charity group. You have, you
Okay.
give. If you don't have, you don't
You
give.
don't. Okay.
So sometimes people do not understand that concept that you might see someone, he would open his bank account. He has millions in the bank account. You'd ask the person, please, I need 10,000 naira. He'll tell you, I don't have 10,000 naira. And in your mind, you're like,
But I
but I
can
just saw
say, yeah.
5 million in your account. I just saw 10 million. That money has already been encumbered for something else.
Mm.
It is not money to be given to somebody.
And so they reserve every
So,
right
yes,
to.
they reserve. And the problem people have sometimes is they can't say no because this is family. So, family needs to understand that you need to draw a certain type of line.
Mhm.
I can assist you with this. up to a point.
Yeah.
Beyond this point, I can't
You
help
have
you.
to carry it.
Yes.
Mhm.
So when they understand that and there are clear lines, there are clear boundaries, and people understand that you're working with a budget, they will respect you. They will adjust around that budget.
Mm.
But if you allow people to lord it over you, even when you have budget, and then you're making certain changes just to accommodate them, when in the long run, you know that this will set you back a
Mhm.
couple of months or even a couple of years, then
Mm.
it's not helping your finances. So when you say no, no should be no, except in instances where it is
Right.
life or death.
How does finance management differ when you're single and when you're married?
So when you're single, it's relatively easier
And
to
then,
manage
relate it
finances.
to the 50-30-20 rule. Does it
Uh,
change significantly?
it doesn't to a very large extent, at least not from where I'm sitting. So let me explain. So when you're single, it's easy for you to cater to yourself. You know your risk appetite. You know what your spending habit is like.
Mhm.
You understand what your day-to-day running expenses are like. Now, when you get married, that's why it's also very good for you to understand your partner's financial habits.
Mm.
If you have someone whose financial habit doesn't align with yours, you'd have problems in the long run. So you need to understand that marrying someone would also entail marrying the person's assets and liabilities to a very large extent. So if the person has a poor financial management and is not able to accommodate your financial management,
Mhm.
it's going to be a problem. So, with respect to personal, when you're single, it's easy for you to manage things yourself. You know what to do at every point in time. You're managing those things. But when you're married, so it's like double the cost,
Mhm.
more or less, or more, depending on when you start having children and all. And then these things are things you can plan for. So, with respect to having a family, you find out that yes, your cost of living might increase significantly, but then that doesn't mean that there are certain places you can't cut costs
Okay.
to ensure that you are aligned in what you are doing.
Okay. Such
I'd
as.
give instances. Now, when you are married to someone, I expect that your partner is also doing something, except in a situation where your partner
Your
is
full.
unemployed, like
Mhm.
fully dependent on you. That
Mhm.
is when you're carrying the full burden.
Mhm.
But then when your partner is also working, I also expect that your partner, before they got married to you, were handling their own bit too.
Yeah.
So it's a shared responsibility now.
Yeah.
You are managing your assets together, you're managing your liabilities together. So it's not going to be a lot. The difference wouldn't be so significant when your resources are merged
Yes.
together. It becomes a problem when it's only one person, maybe by virtue of the marriage, is handling everything. That's where it becomes a problem. You now find out that that dynamic would change. The formula, the 50-30 formula would change. Then the person will now have to sit down and reevaluate to see what needs to go and what needs to stay, especially when children start coming. Child care is very expensive.
Yes.
Let's say you married someone that has debt, an existing debt profile.
Mm.
And before the marriage, you didn't talk about how to manage that debt. Is it your personal debt that you'd have to find a way to clear?
Are
Or
we?
are we merging this together?
Yes.
So if you marry that person and you are absorbing that debt, that also means that it's going to hit your own finances too.
And then you make adjustments
Exactly. So
alongside.
everything is about
Mm.
understanding what that entire picture looks like and then making the necessary tweak
Mm.
to suit your preferences.
When we look at how you finance your health and healthcare
Mm.
as a single person, how does that, begin to change? You know, what are the tweaks that come into place once you get married, and of course, when children come into play? How does that factor into the whole managing of your finance?
Okay. So with family, so it's an increase in expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're just bringing in your spouse, it's like double expenditure. With children, the expenditure increases too. So you need to know how to manage that at every point in time. Now, with insurance, is such that the premium increases, one, with respect to the number of people involved and the potential risk that that insurance is covering. Now, for marriage, insuring a single person when you're single, let's say a single man, you have a clean bill of health and
Mm-hmm.
everything. It's relatively cheaper in comparison to insuring a man and his pregnant wife. There's maternity care involved here.
Mm-hmm.
Maternity care is not cheap, and and
Not true,
yeah,
true.
so these are things you need to. Personal finance is not just about knowing where your money, how to spend money. It's also about knowing how to tweak your money to work for you. It's
Mm-hmm.
not everything that you need to necessarily pay for. So that's where insurance comes in, HMOs and the rest.
HMOs in themselves, how much do they cover? How much do they account for in terms of your health and healthcare? Because you talk of routine checks and all the likes, right? Do they really cover those things? And then most people in Nigeria, their HMOs is actually tied to where they work. Yes. Yeah. So I just want you to navigate that whole scenario because when we talk health insurance, the truth is in Nigeria, they barely, I don't know, I don't have the numbers, but I doubt they're up to 20% of the population that actually have health insurance.
Yes. So thanks. So with respect to health insurance, I think the last statistics that I could recall about health insurance, this is Africa, there are about 89% of people without health insurance. 89%, that's a lot. So it might have changed slightly between that statistic and possibly now. I don't know when that statistic was given. I think maybe sometime in 2023 or thereabout. But health management organizations, HMOs, so they're more like intermediaries between whoever is paying for healthcare and the healthcare provider. So it's essentially a business that links the parties involved, and you expect them to turn a profit at some point. So HMOs function very largely from pool of funds. So it's like the more funds they have in their
Mm-hmm.
pool,
The more they're able
the
to.
more the possibility of having better access to certain things. Now, in this part of the world, it's healthcare is not really great because government funding and a whole bunch of other things are not the way they're supposed to be. We don't have the right infrastructure for healthcare. Now, so you find out that those businesses, the HMOs now, they are trying as much as possible to give you the best they can at the same time, not run at a loss.
Mm.
So a lot of things, standard things, will not be covered under the HMO because those things are expensive to get.
Even
When
for the
yes,
HMOs,
yes, for
despite
the
the
HMOs.
pool of funds they seem to
Yes.
have.
So the good thing about having HMOs is because of the pool of people they're dealing with, it's easier for HMOs to strike better deals with healthcare providers to ensure that certain costs are driven lower and that what you're getting is also quality healthcare.
Mm.
Unlike just an individual walking into any random health facility and paying out of pocket for whatever. Now, with the whole lack of access to health insurance and everything, it's a very tricky situation for the healthcare providers, the intermediaries who are
Mhm.
the HMOs, and us who are also paying for those services.
There are alternatives? Is there a way to circumnavigate this? Bearing in mind that in terms of purchasing power or financial capability, right, it's
Mm,
quite low in this part of the world, right? Most people barely earn
mm,
an upkeep, right? They barely earn enough to for their daily life, right? So what are the alternatives that could come into play? How can healthcare be better financed in Nigeria, in Africa as a whole?
Okay, thank you. So HMOs, so most plans for HMOs are tiered. So
Mm,
it's based on there are different levels
mm,
and different coverage for each of those things. Now, the most basic level would have most of those amenities like excluded, but then you'd also find out that HMOs, like I said previously, it's a business that's trying to run,
mm,
turn a profit. And as such, their principal goal would be to minimize unnecessary procedures. Yes, and that would reduce the cost that they have to incur, the cost they have to pay to the actual health providers.
mm,
So that is why sometimes you find out that HMOs are refusing. They'd rather go through like a very abridged version of the doctors and whatever, and then ensure that you just get like a very minimal maybe drugs dispensed to you and all because it's
mm,
less cost for them and more profit for them. But it doesn't remove the fact that for very little things like malaria and all those things, HMOs actually cover those things. And then most basic tests, depending on the level of the coverage you have with the HMO. So those things help to an extent, but it's not exhaustive. That is why if you want to get a plan with an HMO, you need to know what the benefits are. You also need to know what the waiting period is for certain procedures under the HMO plan
mm.
because there are certain procedures under the HMO plan that will tell you you can only have access to this benefit 6 months after
After
joining the HMO. So you need to know exactly what the terms and
that
conditions
makes
of
sense.
whichever plan you're signing on for uh, covers. So the next thing, alternatives to HMOs, there are quite a number of alternatives. Most recently, you find out these new fintech companies coming up with having a little bit of HMO or insurance attached to them.
Okay.
To give an instance, OPay, PalmPay, you'd see in their apps where you can buy little insurance, monthly insurance,
Oh,
and all.
really? I
Yes,
don't think
those things.
I've
So
looked
those
at
are
that.
like tele insurance.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's like a mini form of insurance.
Okay,
It's
but
it's
not
like yeah,
as
it's not as
demanding on your
crazy.
pocket
Yeah, it's not as
as
crazy,
yes.
and the plan is quite flexible.
Mm,
So it's easier for the common man to afford those things.
mm,
Are those plans exhaustive and do they cover everything you need?
mhm,
Of course not.
mm.
But it's better to have something than not having
Than nothing.
anything at all.
But, but do you know if anyone has tried to use? I mean, someone who's been paying the monthly subscription, as it were.
Yes.
If they've now tried to pay for a health service with those, I'm referring to the likes of the Opay company.
Yes, I've had situations where I don't need to use my
Oh, you
HMO anymore.
yourself
Yes,
use?
I've
Oh,
used it.
oh,
So
okay.
I just simply went into the app and
Oh,
like I had the
that's
doctor's
nice.
consultation. So there's telemedicine within the app and everything.
Within the
Yes,
oh, really?
within the
I've
app. So
never.
you
I
just
just do
go,
my transfer and
yeah,
I
you just go in there. They
yeah.
connect you to a doctor. They tell you chat with this doctor on WhatsApp, and then the doctor assesses you and tells you, okay, you have coverage for this and this,
Oh,
then take this code to whichever pharmacy that is around you. They tell you the pharmacies they're affiliated to.
oh,
You go
okay.
there, you pick up your drugs.
Oh,
But
pretty
then,
much like an
yeah,
HMO.
yeah, pretty much like an HMO. But like I said, the coverage is not like very extensive. It's
Yeah.
just very minimal
Basic
thing. Yeah,
things,
basic
malaria
things.
and the
Yeah,
likes.
for those who don't have HMO, you can't go through the hassle of getting HMO
Mm,
approvals. Now, another aspect is that there are things they call community-based health insurance. So
mm,
these are things that you see at community levels. You see maybe president generals of communities or ballets and all coming together, forming maybe go to very influential people within the
mhm,
community, institute healthcare
mhm,
plans and all, and then they come together and give subsidized health care for people who can't afford those things in the community. I've seen those things going on, and I think this is very predominant in Rwanda. So
okay.
Rwanda is very big on community-based health
Oh,
insurance. Yeah, so they even though they might have a little bit of government help from here and there, but they're not waiting for the government to do anything for them to a very large
So it's
extent.
more like the
They move.
community has a pause,
Yes,
and then they use it to help.
exactly. And then they
Okay.
utilize the local experts amongst them, the medical
Mm,
experts among them
okay.
to render
Mm,
those services.
mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a lot cheaper than going to the
Actually,
private practice of
true.
those experts.
Very true.
So it's a way of accessing health at
Mm.
a subsidized rate.
Let's talk about research financing, right? Talk about how much work is going into the bench work that people are putting into coming up with, ideas, and however they're not able to go into full blown um, research and full blown human trial. So let's talk about that and then talk about what financing of that looks like for Africa and Africans that are heavily interested in bringing their solutions, their ideas to fruition, to life, to potentially help, you know, their fellow Africans and potentially help the world at large.
And so there are
So,
sponsors who are interested in Africa and conducting their trials in Africa. Now, the thing with funding is it's still as competitive as it used to be, but it's easier now since you can find more sponsors who are aligned to your research interest as before. Before now, it was as you could find a sponsor that is aligned to your research interest. It's just that the sponsor may not be interested in Africa as a region. But
mm,
now that is changing
change.
gradually. So it gives you access to more sponsors now. But then the issue is understanding what you need to do at every point in time.
Mm,
So ask
budgeting.
yourself a good question as to what is it that you're trying to achieve. So when you ask yourself, what research question are you trying to solve?
Mm,
That's the first step. When you get that, you now get a good concept notes to back that up. And then the point where people get it wrong is the budget,
mm,
because that can easily make or mar your proposal,
yeah.
because you need to know what the sponsor is looking for. What appeals to you might be different from what appeals to them. And that is where experts in the field, people, the finance experts in that particular industry come in. They need to be able to tell you what to do at every given point in time. So you can't use generic budgets across board because each study is different. So you need to understand what should appeal to each sponsor at each given point in time with respect to each study, and then be able to reflect that in the budget. So when you put out a generic budget there, they just look at it, they don't see the details they're looking for. It's likely that they're going to trash that project, that proposal, no matter how good your concept note is, because it's difficult for them to relate how am I funding this and how is this going to give me the results I'm looking for, because it's not reflected on that budget. So when you get that concept notes and then draft the budget, you need a finance expert. So it's good we start talking to people who are interested in
Mhm.
finance to be able to separate the clinical work from the finance work. So everyone has their own specialty. So that you're good in this, the bench research and all, that's good. So leave the financing part, the budgeting part to experts in that field. Let them figure it out. Let them give the sponsors exactly what they're looking for. So when you get that budgeting part, and then there are also places where you need to defend um, the budget, the concept note alongside the budget. And so drafting the budget is one thing. It's marrying that budget in such a way that it gives the sponsor a sense of understanding of how you're going to carry out that research and how the returns on their investment would benefit both them and the community they're trying to carry out that research in. Because there are ethical considerations. You don't just come in and do certain things. So they need to also understand that coming in to do that research would also benefit the community, and that there are no legal issues that will come out of it in the long run. So these are things that the finance person needs to take into account: regulatory requirements, ethical considerations, participant safety, and all these things. So it's a lot when it comes to budgeting for clinical trials. So you'd want to have a finance person who is dedicated to handle that.